After sending Zero away, Oberlin fell silent for a moment. It was due to cowardice and fear, he said slowly. That to reclaim the glory of the witches after defeating the demon, Acris decreed that only the transcendent witches should ascend to the throne. But transcendent witches were extremely rare, and over time, some remarkable ordinary witches took on the role of the Pope. Fearful that one day they might face retribution from those oppressed witches, the mortal archbishop directly usurped the position. Oberlin intently told Maine that this secret must be kept within his heart. As for the other parts of history, Maine will come to know them in Illusion Chamber. Oberlin said even if Maine decided to let go of the Pope position, it could also be a good decision. Maine didn't quite grasp the weight of Oberlin's words, but he noticed that Oberlin's breath was fading, his eyes slowly closing. In the final moments, Maine thought he heard an apology, a whispered, "I'm sorry." In the border town, Agatha dressed up and, after breakfast, accompanied Wendy to Roland's office. Roland first inquired about Agatha's well-being and how she felt about the breakfast. Instead of replying immediately, Agatha studied the prince. For the first time, she found herself unable to read a mere mortal. Roland suggested that Agatha could tour the town with Nightingale or inquire Scroll about the books she might want to read. Shaking her head, Agatha showed no interest in these offerings. All she wanted to know was how Roland planned to prove that ordinary people could defeat the demon. Roland shrugged. Besides heavy industry, light industry, and people's livelihoods are also important. He don't know why Agatha so interested in cannons. Agatha frowned, once again confronted with unfamiliar terms. Roland chuckled, offering no explanation, but promised to show her the latest weaponry in the afternoon. Before, Roland had wanted to ask about the daily lives of the people in the holy city of Takira from 450 years ago, such as what they ate. Agatha was taken aback by such a question, not expecting him to be curious about such matters. She explained that she never paid attention to what ordinary people ate. As for the guards and servants in her tower, they were provided with 3 meals a day. Apart from the month of the demons, they would have meat once a week. When the topic of wages came up, Agatha remarked, mortals serving her and dedicate their lives to her. In return, she provide them with shelter and food, and impart knowledge to them. She felt there was no need to offer them any additional wages. Roland's curiosity grew as he listened. After those initial questions, he moved on to inquire about Agatha's knowledge of magic power and magic stones. Agatha explained that magic stones originated from the god punishment stones. However, their research on this topic cost them a lot of time and effort. To gain more insights, Roland would have to exchange it with knowledge that could increase the chances of a witch's awakening. Roland agreed. Tilly showed Agatha her flying magic stone and asked why they chose to walk when they had access to such stones. Agatha explained that while they understood magic power and magic stones, they couldn't manufacture the stones themselves. She went on to reveal that the stones were a creation of the demons. Within the demon species, there exists a peculiar kind they refer to as the Chaos Beast. Once these creatures consume a god punishment stone, they can produce various magic stones. They had once captured one alive. Although it continuously produced magic stones, they didn't know how to care for it properly, and the Chaos Beast died after just 6 months. Common demons also use magic stones in combat, Agatha explained. The type of stone that Tilly possesses likely belongs to one of the more powerful demon leaders. When Roland asked if the demons had always had these stones, Agatha rolled her eyes, telling him, if what Roland implying were true, humans would have been annihilated long ago. During the First Divine War, most demons didn't wield magic stones. They relied on their enormous strength, donned heavy iron armor, and attacked human cities with iron spears. This is well documented in historical records. The war raged on for centuries. Ultimately, humans were defeated and retreated to the plains. By the time of the Second Divine War, the demons' tactics had evolved significantly. That war only lasted 35 years before they were thoroughly defeated, largely due to the vast disparity in numbers. As to how these demons reproduced, Agatha admitted she didn't know. However, she did know that demons cannot survive outside of the red mist. The flying and other beasts of the demons, however, didn't require this mist for survival. Upon being shown a photograph by Roland, after hearing their encounter, Agatha recognized the presence of demons in the forest. She suddenly stood up, her voice trembling with excitement, saying those were squat stone towers, they are devices to produce and store the red mist. She wanted to attack the demon camp. Upon hearing the proposition to launch an offensive attack against the demons, the witches inhaled sharply in surprise. Agatha said, if there are watcher demons in place for surveillance, it's guaranteed that there is a chaos beast within the camp. Otherwise, a small outpost in such a remote location, nestled between mountains and sea, wouldn't deploy rare high-ranking demons for protection. Roland recalled the highly corrosive nature of the red mist and how they couldn't get close to it. Agatha clarified, the red mist is only effective against witches. Ordinary humans, animals, and plants can survive beneath it, and flames can accelerate its dispersal. Agatha stated bluntly, this could be an opportunity for Roland to show her firsthand how mortals can win over demons. Pointing at Tilly, she suggested, Roland could use the flying witches to distract the flying beasts. Roland chuckled, shaking his head, telling her that last reconnaissance wasn't carried out by flying witches but by a hot air balloon. This transportation tool can only accommodate about 10 people and isn't suitable for transporting soldiers. Furthermore, Agatha's plan isn't foolproof. They don't know the number of enemies they are facing, and he don't want to see casualties. A wave of irritation washed over Agatha. She thought to herself, how could there possibly be a perfect plan when battling demons? How could there not be casualties? This prince is undoubtedly deceiving her. Only someone who's never experienced the brutality of war would be so concerned about the life and death of their troops. Although she felt disappointed, Agatha managed to keep her emotions in check. She kept these thoughts to herself, deciding to reserve her judgment until after seeing the new weapons. However, her hope in Roland had greatly diminished, and she didn't harbor much expectation for these new weapons. A prince who only knew of battles from books, a group of supporting witches, and frail, powerless mortals, how could they ever defeat the demon? She slowly took a seat. When asked why they named the war against the demon invaders the Divine War, Agatha responded with a hint of desolation. The annals don't document the reason for the war's name, but that's what everyone calls it, she then continued, revealing that the demons came through the stone gates, also known as the gates of hell, rising from the depths of the earth. According to the annals, every time the blood-red moon descends, the gates of hell would open. In any case, these stone gates open once every few centuries. Roland clapped his hands, encouraging everyone to stay optimistic. They now had a general understanding of the demon. He opened the office door, suggesting everyone take a break for lunch first. A surge of irritation bubbled up in Agatha's heart as she fiercely cut into the meat on her plate. She was immensely displeased with the prince's luxurious lifestyle, indulging in gourmet food even during times of war. This only fueled her anger more. It was a mix of resenting her inability to resist the allure of delicious food and her frustrations towards Roland. When she saw Roland leave alone after his meal, Wendy explained, His Highness is taking his afternoon nap, it's his usual routine. He always says that maintaining one's health is of utmost importance and ensures he gets adequate rest. Agatha grew even more angry, thinking that it was just an excuse for laziness. Agatha couldn't fathom why all the witches here placed such unwavering trust in this prince. Did they truly believe that he could defeat the demon and the so-called church? Wendy softly replied that she wasn't certain about the thoughts of the other sisters, but she believed in His Highness. Because Roland can turn things others can't even dare to imagine into reality. Wendy reminisced about Roland rescuing witches, establishing a town where witches and ordinary people coexisted harmoniously, leading commoners against the demonic beasts. Also defeating a duke with territories several times larger than his own, and even triumphing over Timothy's vast army. Agatha countered, claiming these are mere mortal conflicts, incomparable to the God Punishment Army and the demons. Wendy shook her head gently, it's not just that. Roland imparted knowledge and ideals that evolved the abilities of 4 witch sisters. Roland not only created machines of immense power but also weapons that enable ordinary people and night to overcome even extraordinary witches. And as these miracles unfurled daily around Wendy, her eyes twinkled with mirth, yet her voice brimmed with conviction. She firmly believed that one day, Roland will become the king of Grey Castle, leading them to a brighter future. After Wendy left, Agatha was lost in thought for a long while until Nightingale appeared at the door, inviting her to witness the trial of a new weapon. Seeing Prince Roland, who looked drowsy and was yawning, Agatha had a sudden urge to splash a handful of icy slush on his face to wake him up. But she held it in. As they left the castle, it was her first time seeing the full view of the town in daylight. The town was remarkably orderly, even Takara's inner city couldn't boast such neatness and organization. After all, it was just a small town, Agatha thought dismissively and snorted. Turning to Nightingale, she asked, "How many people live here?" Nightingale pondered a bit and said, "It used to be 2,000, but now it's close to 30,000. Agatha initially only heard the 2,000 part and thought Roland was planning to use such a number to fight the demons. But hearing the figure jump to 30,000 made her eyes widen in surprise. How could such a small place house 30,000 residents? Agatha remembered when the population of the Holy City exceeded a certain threshold, the city's demands would multiply. First was the sharp increase in food and water needs, followed by the expansion of slums leading to a deterioration of public order. Having experienced this firsthand, she knew the challenges of expanding a city's population. She thought Nightingale might be misleading her and decided to seek clarity from Wendy. Walking through the bustling streets, Agatha followed the prince and others to climb a segment of the city wall made of mud. Her disappointment deepened. Soldiers saluted Roland, and as they walked along the wall, Agatha soon saw the object of the trial. The weapon's design was quite peculiar. It was a long, metallic cylindrical object. Apart from its fixed stand, there were two shorter tubes attached above and below the main body. She couldn't fathom how it would be used to attack enemies. Roland announced, "This is the latest weapon of Border Town, the emblem of justice and glory, the 152mm Fortress Standard Cannon." Agatha couldn't help but frown. Justice and glory? Fortress Standard? The terms sounded frivolous. The subsequent explanations seemed to be full of crap, forcefully coined terms. Was this truly the knowledgeable Prince Wendy spoke of, who was deeply trusted by the witches? After his speech, only Nightingale clapped, making the atmosphere momentarily awkward. Roland cleared his throat and signaled Axe to begin the test fire. Agatha watched intently, not missing a single movement. Roland motioned for everyone to cover their ears. Just as Agatha was about to ask why, an explosive boom sounded next to her. A ringing echoed in her ears as silence surrounded her. The metallic tube emitted an orange-red flame. Nightingale supported her from behind. Agatha looked at the open snowy field ahead but saw no change. Looking puzzled at Roland, Roland explained that the weapon could launch shells, or she could think of them as giant crossbow bolts, to strike distant enemies. There were flags placed at intervals of 1,000 meters, the farthest one being 5,000 meters away. Roland converted the distances using ancient measurements, leaving Agatha stunned. Unfortunately, 5,000 meters was too far for them to see where the shell landed. He then prepared for a rapid-fire demonstration. When the cannon fired a second time, Agatha was prepared and had covered her ears. What she saw next was incredible. The prince was not lying, the weapon indeed fired projectiles, and at a speed that was impossible to track with the naked eye. She saw explosions in the distance. Gazing at the long-barreled weapon, Agatha was mesmerized. When asked if it was a weapon made by witches, Roland said it was a combined effort of witches and ordinary folks. Agatha felt a crack in her long-held beliefs. Had the Federation been wrong all along? Was what the prince said true? When Tilly saw the new weapon, she was equally astonished. Ashes and Andrea were perplexed about how the weapon could generate such immense power. Tilly felt they had been left far behind in technological advancements, which left her slightly despondent. Seeing the painstakingly assembled ammunition get depleted so quickly, Roland felt a pang of pain in his heart. Still, he had to maintain an enigmatic demeanor to hide his reluctance. The firing process went smoothly, and the results were encouraging, at least judging by Agatha's stunned expression. The cannon's performance surpassed her expectations. However, for Roland, the cannon was far from satisfactory. There were still many technicalities to be refined, particularly the weapons chamber was too small, leading to less than ideal range. After dinner, Roland awaited Tilly in his office. He wanted to discuss their strategy for the upcoming Third Divine War and their shared future. Pouring a cup of tea, Roland handed it to Tilly. Accepting the tea, she blinked, seemingly waiting for him to continue. Roland hoped Tilly can continue saying the strength of the demons is unpredictable. They need to gather all the power they can to have a chance at winning this war. He then mentioned her about the weapon they saw earlier that were capable of defeating the demons. Taking a sip of her tea, Tilly remained silent for a long time. Though Roland tried to maintain a calm face, Roland anxiously awaited her response. Finally, breaking the silence, Tilly asked, if she were to stay, what will happen to the witches back on Slumbering Isle? Suppressing his excitement, Roland said, bring them all to Border Town. He can allocated land specifically for Slumbering Isle witches. They'd still be led by Tilly. He didn't care if those witches couldn't fight for him. He believed support witches could play a significant role. Tilly seemed tempted by the generous offer, keen on both fighting the demons and pursuing her academic interests. However, she expressed concern about the independence of the Slumbering Isle witches. If they relocate to the western regions and a conflict arises, the witches would be defenseless. Before Roland could protest, saying it will never happen, Tilly cut him off, emphasizing the precariousness of relying solely on verbal assurances. She posed a question that left Roland stumped. If the roles were reversed, would Roland simply entrust everything to an ally based on words alone? Roland hesitated. The answer was clear. He wouldn't easily trust anyone either. In a last attempt, Roland confessed, Tilly is his sister. He won't harm her. With a painful expression, Tilly closed her eyes, trying to wave off the terrible memories. For now, she only wanted to remain ally while support Border Town's development to the best of her abilities. After Tilly's departure, Nightingale appeared. Sitting atop the desk, she remarked, she didn't expect someone who wouldn't be swayed by Roland's words. Roland knew Tilly wasn't entirely convinced. Their relationship had always been tense. But Nightingale was curious about Roland's past antics in the royal palace. As he recounted tales of his mischievous youth, Nightingale commented on how terrible he had been, but also how Tilly didn't seem to despise him now. Teasingly, she added, if the Slumbering Isle witches join them and there are more witches like ashes around, she'll be too busy. Not everyone is as cute and obedient as Maisie. Perhaps it was just Roland's imagination, but Nightingale seemed quite pleased with the evening's outcome. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Much to Roland's surprise, for it was nearly midnight, the one who pushed open the door was Agatha. Agatha learned from Wendy that all of Roland's knowledge, be it about firearms or cannons, was documented in books. Upon hearing this, Roland took out 2 books, telling Agatha that they contained the principles but not the crafting methods, they were merely introductory textbooks. Agatha then inquired again, confirming that only members of the Witch Union could study these materials. She expressed her desire to join the Witch Union. Roland, somewhat curious, remarked that the Witch Union was an organization specific to the border town and that the lord of this small town was just a mere mortal. Agatha lowered her gaze, saying that if weapons can be crafted potent enough to counter demons, while keeping the witches safe and also not in conflict with the Federation, she wouldn't mind collaborating with a mortal. She hesitated for a moment, perhaps finding it a bit difficult to say to serve Roland. Roland had initially thought Agatha would accompany Tilly to the Slumbering Isle. However, Agatha declared she no longer wished to flee, she hoped to witness victory right here. After a pause, Roland said he couldn't ensure they wouldn't be at odds with the Federation. Roland, suspecting the Federation might not have disbanded but rather rebranded and gone underground. Based on the information Agatha provided about their escape from Takira, Roland deduced that when the Federation, with their transcendent witch leading and a group of saintly warriors, migrated here, they shouldn't have gone unnoticed. He suspected the Church might be the new face of the Federation. He doubted that mere mortals could wrest control from witches, suggesting instead that the Federation witches might have turned the Federation into an organization that hunts their own, making it easier to mass-produce the God punishment soldiers. Agatha listened in disbelief to Roland's words, though Roland mentioned it was only a hypothesis. Retrieving 2 hefty books from the bookshelf, he presented her with chronicles penned by the Church itself and the annals of the 4 great kingdoms documented by astrologers, suggesting Agatha give them a read. With utmost seriousness, Roland stated that the Church must be eradicated at all costs. If Agatha was willing to stand by his side against the demons, he would welcome her into the Witch Union. The following day, in the back garden, Agatha showcased her powers. Scroll documented her ability, which was to generate cold, which, after evolving, allowed her to solidify objects even at room temperature. When questioned about the evolution of her powers, Agatha shared how she'd continually tried to chill water more rapidly. Until a particular scene she saw led to her epiphany that everything existed in 3 states: gas, liquid, and solid. This realization of hers was then recorded in the universal laws. Upon Roland's inquiry about what the universal laws were, Agatha was taken aback by his apparent lack of surprise. Roland commented on the ubiquitous presence of gases in the world, adding it was a regular occurrence. He mentioned there were different gases, each with unique boiling and melting points, all of which were common knowledge in the books. A sudden weight pressed on Agatha's chest. Pouting, she explained that the universal laws documented the insights and journeys of high-order awakeners as their powers evolved. Roland once again welcomed Agatha and subsequently assigned her to the alchemy workshop. During lunch, Roland pondered on the large-scale production of nitroglycerin. The most crucial step was temperature control. If the temperature of a large reaction container could be maintained, nitroglycerin could be produced safely in large batches. However, he wasn't entirely sure if this approach was feasible. At the dining table, he shared lunch with Margaret. She assumed Roland's concern was due to the high costs of transporting refugees, causing him to be distressed. Roland waved off the idea, expressing that his mind was on something else and conveyed his gratitude for everything Margaret had done. After slowly finishing her soup, Margaret regretfully mentioned she might not be able to visit the border town as often the next year. She explained that Timothy had issued an order prohibiting the trade of saltpeter. This revelation made Roland puzzled. According to the information Margaret had gathered from City Hall, the royal capital seemed to be planning a comprehensive blockade and sanctions on the western regions. It wasn't just saltpeter, even merchants might be stopped at Crimson Water City. This would not only affect Border Town, but also Changji Stronghold and Willowtown would be impacted. Although many nobles were against it, Timothy had no intention of retracting the order. Thus, Margaret probably wouldn't be able to visit Border Town next year. Roland realized he had pushed Timothy to the brink, but trade was the Achilles heel of Border Town. Currently, the municipal treasury held a limited amount of gold. And saltpeter, essential for the mass production of acid, was in short supply. This would cause significant delays in the weapons upgrade. If no merchants came to Border Town, its economy would collapse. Standing up, Roland spoke to Margaret, assuring her that this situation wouldn't last long. The next time she visited, she would see an entirely transformed city. Margaret looked at him, somewhat surprised. Roland explained that once the month of the demon concluded, he would establish a direct trade route connecting to the fjord. He invited Margaret to be part of it. Margaret, with evident curiosity, pointed out that there seemed to be no good port here that led to the sea. Roland replied, "Not now, but he can build one." He planned to set up a port in the southern part of Border Town, leveling the coastal ridges to facilitate the transportation of goods from the Western Territory. Roland hoped Margaret would provide ships to handle the transport and sales. Soon, Roland had his guards bring in the newest products of Border Town. A guard entered, presenting a plate filled with transparent crystal bottles. Margaret, driven by curiosity, uncorked one and sniffed. Her eyes instantly lit up. It was perfume. She examined the bottle from every angle, clearly enamored. Compared to the products from the royal capital, this perfume seemed even more fragrant. Generously, Roland gifted Margaret several bottles. When she inquired about the annual production capacity, Roland mentioned it could be tenfold that of the royal capital. However, internally, Roland knew that with Leaf and Evelyn, he could produce even more. But rarity adds value. He hoped Margaret could act as an agent to sell these goods. Margaret agreed without hesitation. She was well aware of the golden opportunity in front of her. Outside the window, the snow grew heavier, large flakes as big as fingernails fell from the sky. Looking out, the town was covered by snow. In a room, Tilly, Anna, and Agatha sat close together, enjoying the warmth of the charcoal fire, discussing and learning fascinating new information. When Agatha asked Tilly what Roland was like before, Tilly hesitated for a moment. Then said he was arrogant and timid, also very obstinate. Overall, he had a terrible character, she said with a hint of complaint. Even after coming here and showing some improvement, it's still hard to guess what's on his mind. The room went silent. Tilly felt the strange gaze of the other two. Anna chuckled, indicating that it was the first time she'd heard Tilly speak like that. Realizing she had spoken too freely, Tilly felt she had been impolite, especially coming from an ally. Perhaps she had been too relaxed recently. Before Tilly could explain herself, Anna waved her off with a smile, saying the prince wouldn't mind such words. Anna reasoned that Roland probably had his own difficulties and past regrets. Tilly was surprised, as Roland never discussed these things with Anna. Anna added that she never asked and believed that if Roland wanted to share, he would. From their conversation, Agatha inferred that Roland had changed significantly from his past self. There were rumors in the Exploration Society that the more extraordinary a person, the more peculiar habits they might possess. Such a transformation in Roland might be seen as a normal phenomenon. Agatha asked if Roland ever howled at the moon in the royal palace or stared at walls for a long time. Tilly shook her head, saying that other than acting somewhat eccentrically, he was no different from ordinary people. However, she had heard stories of him proclaiming in a court lesson that he wanted to marry a witch. Likely, because of this, both his elder brothers and his father began to dislike him. Agatha mentioned that marrying a witch was a grand ideal in Takira. Tilly clarified that times were different 400 years ago. If he married a witch, he wouldn't have an heir to inherit everything. It was unthinkable for a prince. Tilly sighed, hoping that after all this time, Roland had forgotten about the foolish things he'd once said. Anna suddenly spoke up, but the prince still wants to marry a witch. Upon hearing this, both of them widened their eyes in surprise.